Hello, empowered woman. Welcome to this episode of the Empowered Woman podcast. Today is one of those days. I'm keeping it short and sweet to encourage and empower you as I share a bit about my struggles lately and, of course, how I've been turning them into opportunities to learn. You may remember last summer I dedicated a whole episode to talk about grief when I unexpectedly lost one of my dogs, and it's with a sad heart that I come today to share that we've lost our other dog, my beloved Preto. Whether you've been dealing with loss lately or just could use some words of encouragement and ideas on how to find a lesson in your hardest times, I know this will uplift you today. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Empowered Woman podcast, the #1 show on personal growth, visibility, and profit for women entrepreneurs. If you're wanting to start believing in yourself, giving yourself permission to succeed, and let your voice be heard to make an impact in the world as an entrepreneur, this is the place for you. I am so glad that you're here. My name is Marcia Spurk, and I'm your host, triplet mom, woman empowerment coach, and all things motivation extraordinaire. Welcome again, and let's dive into today's episode.
Well, first and foremost, it has been a while. I usually record 2 solo episodes a month, sometimes more. And because my last solo episode was actually repurposing the audio of a training I did inside my Facebook group, I actually haven't recorded a solo episode in almost a month, which is so crazy to think about because I love just sitting here and rambling on. That's pretty much the reason why I started a podcast, was to just be able to gain clarity as I talk through stuff, because I feel like I get so much more clarity as I talk as opposed to writing. And so I'm very grateful for this platform. I've had clients recently say, "Oh my gosh, you'd be so good on YouTube. Why don't you just do YouTube? Do you have a YouTube channel?" And I love having a podcast because I don't have to worry about where I am, what I look like. I don't have to worry about editing it a whole lot. It's literally voice and it's done. So I'm very grateful for this. And I know I say this a lot, but I really, really am. And as usual, I didn't expect to be talking about what I'm going to be talking about today. You may have seen on social, I shared earlier in the week that we had to put down our last dog. That was actually our very first dog. And it's just never easy. It's just the toughest thing in the world. And so last year, I guess I'll backtrack and do a little bit of storytelling and then share a little bit about how I've been feeling and the things that have been going through my mind even before this, and how this event has helped confirm the nudges and really the realizations that I've been having. So before I got married, so I'm from Brazil, and I got married and moved to the US. I had known my husband for 5 years before we just decided, we got to do something about this. Long distance is not going to cut it, with me living in Brazil and him in the US. And before I moved, because everything was so new and it was a whole lot of adapting, not only to a new country, even though I was very familiar with the American culture, but to just living together because we had been around each other physically on a very limited basis, living in different countries, And so he decided to get a dog. And he had never had a Doberman. So that's the 2 dogs that I had were Doberman Pinschers. And usually not people's first choice because they're so intimidating physically. But they're the sweetest, most loving, and needy, might I add, dogs ever. And so he had a friend that had, I believe, the female that had had the puppies. And he decided to get the dog before we got married and I moved, because he knew I would be lonely. I didn't know anyone, right? And he would be going to work. So that was the thought process. And I believe he was a little bit over 2 months old when I arrived. And what's interesting is that we got married May 21st in Brazil, and then we left on the 23rd, and I landed on the 24th. And then one of his friends came to pick us up at the airport, and Preto was in the car, sitting in the front seat with the seatbelt on. It was the cutest thing. And it was just kind of a weird situation because I didn't really know him. It was me getting used to him. Oh, and it actually makes me teary already. I didn't expect it to get teary right away because, as you start talking about it, you start remembering the moments. I remember when I first got here in the US, I was just so exhausted and hungry. I had like a Chipotle burrito, and I was like, this is huge. Like, I was not used to the ins and outs of living in the United States. I've visited countless times, but I remember that I took a nap on the couch, and Preto was laying there, and it was like, it kind of reminds me of having the babies, and you love the babies, but you're not really used to the babies. And that's kind of how it was. And to think that, 11 years later, he was just my biggest pal. But anyway, so he'd been around and he'd been a trooper. He went with us to Brazil when we moved. He came back after we had the kids. And the same was with our girl dog that we got 2 years after we'd been married. So when Preto was 2, we got Ruby. And I wanted to have a female because we were thinking maybe we'll breed. And I was dead set on having a brown, or I guess she's brown, but they say red because it's like a rusty color. So a red Doberman. And so that's what it was. She was a lot smaller than him. He was the epitome of like a show dog. He was just gorgeous when he was young. He was just so regal looking. And his fur was just so shiny and so soft, whereas she had a little bit more coarse hair and she had lots of skin issues. So he was like, he had papers that we actually lost, but he was just, regardless of any of that, he was an amazing dog. And when she passed last summer, it was just such a shock because she was 8. So she was younger than him. But granted, I know her health wasn't the greatest. So that's probably why she had issues earlier on than him, although there's no way of telling. But anyways, when she passed last summer, it was just like, oh my gosh, it's going to be Preto next and pretty soon, because we had been concerned about him with him being older, and he put on a lot of weight, but he lost a lot of weight right around the time that she passed. And so we were kind of like on our toes, and with him being so heavy, having like hip issues. Anyways, we knew it was just a matter of time. And 10 months later is when his body actually starts giving out, and it wasn't a matter of days. It's just incredible how that goes. And I know that's the way it is with people too. You have some symptoms, you go look at it, and it's like, it's too late. And that's exactly what happened. So over the weekend, he stopped eating, and he was having diarrhea, and he was kind of moaning when he would go outside. Like, we just knew it was off. And as much as I didn't want it to be it, I knew in the back of my mind that it was it because of him being such an advanced age. But you know what was the hardest, I think, is the fact that it was around our anniversary, with it happening just a few days short of our anniversary, like of the time that I actually met him. And not that it would have been any easier at any other point, but it was just, hard. And the night before I took him into the vet, I knew that I was going to go, that it was going to happen. Like, I just knew in my gut that I was going to go by myself. I was going to have to make that decision, and I was going to have to say goodbye. And it was almost like I wanted to have that moment with him, to be able to thank him. That was the only thing that came to my mind, and it's the same thing that happened with Ruby, my girl. It was just so much gratitude for the times that we spent together and for the memories that we shared, and really for the things that I learned, because with having triplets and feeling so guilty that I wasn't giving them the attention that I could have if it was just one kid, I know that having them really prepared me to be able to take care of my kids. And however overwhelming and hard it was to have 2 extra babies to take care of, they brought so much joy even to the kids. And that's something that they would always say, how they missed her, and now how they will miss Preto, because he was literally a part of the family. But with all of this, I have been reflecting on how, especially since the pandemic, I have been prompted to rest, to take more breaks, and to stop equaling my worth to how much I work and to how much I can do. And when somebody you love passes away, it makes you rethink your routine. It makes you rethink what you're doing with your life, because then you're reminded that what we have right now is not forever, right? Regardless of afterlife or any of that, what is right now is not forever. And even with my kids growing, they're going to start kindergarten in the fall. All of a sudden, the craziness and the chaos of the newborn stage and then the toddler stage, things are starting to go a lot faster than they were in the beginning. Let's put it that way. It's still challenging. Obviously, it's triplets. But I'm with them just talking so much, understanding everything. It's like they are real people, and they're developing their personalities and their tastes. They're growing into themselves. And as much as it's beautiful, it's also so freaking scary. And that's really what I felt with the passing of Preto. It's that, we've had amazing moments, but with that, and that comes with a price, right? And that's what we hear, and we know that loving is losing. Loving is learning to let go. And I have never been very good at letting go, because I'm extremely stubborn. And now I'm learning more and more that while this stubbornness and determination is super helpful, it can also cause lots of stress and anxiety, because I have the tendency of wanting to control everything. But then when you think kids, and especially when you think about death, you cannot control that. But you can control your actions, right? And your attitude. And this is really what his passing has invited me to do even more, is to rest, take care of myself, be more present, all the things that I struggle with, and that I think most of us struggle with in different ways and in different levels. And something that I shared that I had already been thinking about, and then this whole situation reminded me. I shared it on social media. I sent it in my emails, and I got such amazing feedback. I talked about how for several years growing up, I didn't like my name. I didn't like that my mom decided to name me an old lady's name, put simply. It's just not a common name. I know in Hispanic, Spanish-speaking countries, Marta is common and not necessarily for older generations, but in Brazil it really is. I only knew one girl that had this name when I was little in preschool, and her name was Maria Marta. Very not common. And there were times where I would argue with my mom and say, why did you call me that? Like silly kid stuff. And I just felt so outraged. And then especially growing up and then reading the Bible and seeing the story or the small passage that talks about Martha and Mary, I always resented that Martha was the distracted one. I wanted to be like Mary. Why do I get the name of the lady that is not doing what she's supposed to be doing? And what I've understood, though, is that most of us lead our lives like Martha. So for those of you who don't know, there's a passage in the book of Luke. It's chapter 10, starting at verse 38, so 38 through 41, I believe, that talks about Martha and Mary and how Martha was always running around busy. Like I can imagine her just feeling so overwhelmed because at one point she even complains and she says, Jesus, Mary's not even helping me. And he calls her out and he says, you are so busy, so troubled, so anxious, but Mary has chosen the better part. Mary has chosen the good spot to be in, which is at my feet, just not doing anything, resting and listening to me. And for me, with my beliefs and growing up as a Christian, I know this passage would not be there if there wasn't a meaning and purpose to it. And that's why I believe, especially at this day and age, that most of us struggle with standing still, with resting, because it always feels like there's something else that needs to be done. We go to sleep and our brains can't shut off. And we've got the millions of notifications on our phones and so many different things and feeling bombarded and overwhelmed all of the time. And then add that to 5-year-old triplets. And I've been understanding this more and more because I understand that this is a challenge for me to begin with because I am so energetic and I'm such a go-getter and action taker. And see, this is really the challenge, I believe, with becoming self-aware, is that there is a temptation of beating yourself up because you find this, crack in the armor, and then you're like, oh wow, I'm a terrible human being. And you'd think I'd give myself some slack. I hear this from friends and mentors all the time. Marta, you have triplets. Marta, you have triplets. And you'd think that I would take that into consideration when I feel tempted to beat myself up or when I legit just do it. But it's just because it's my reality. Sometimes I just don't give it any thought. And it's just like I'm supposed to be able to do all of these things because it's just my reality. And I've realized recently that, of course, I am always on my toes. And I'm always thinking, what else is there to do? Especially with my reality of triplets. Because that's what it is. I'm always on my toes because I'm always doing head count. I'm always thinking about what else is going to happen. Of course, it makes 100% sense. And so with that, this is what I want to leave you with today, is that when you realize that you have been acting like Martha, do not beat yourself up and instead reframe it and remind yourself that resting does not mean being unproductive. It does not mean defeat. Because resting is just as an important part as taking action in your progress journey. It goes back to what I've touched on in several different episodes on the importance of the lows and the highs. You can't appreciate the high if there are no lows. You can't really appreciate taking action and really take intentional action and meaningful action if you don't take the time to rest. That's just the way that it is. It's that heartbeat, right? Up, down, up, down. That's life. You have to have both. That's why we have to sleep through the night, right? That's why if you're not sleeping well, you don't have a good day and you don't have a good life because you need that rest. Physically, it is very important, and emotionally, and on so many different levels. And this is really the revelation that I've had is my gosh, resting is not defeat. I really, really need it. And my hope for you today is that you will choose the better part, which is allowing yourself to take a break and honoring yourself in that fashion, because resting is an action step. Resting is doing something because it's a choice. And when it's intentional, it is even more meaningful. And that will allow you to be more productive when you are producing and when you are doing things. And I never really looked at it that way. Isn't that incredible? I hope that this encourages you today. And let me tell you a quick secret. I have been overwhelmed with gratitude, even more than ever, with everyone reaching out and expressing their, condolences and their thoughts with Preto's passing. So I wanted to share a little bit more of the story of what exactly happened. I wanted to talk to you about how this whole thing has really reinforced to me the importance of me resting. But I also wanted to thank you for being so encouraging to me. Because whether you realize it or not, I'm always encouraging and empowering people. But the reason why I do it is because I needed to. So it keeps me accountable. As I encourage you, I encourage myself. So I guess a quick ask here too is that if you have some words of encouragement and empowerment for me, please send it my way. I need it just as much as you. I am not above anybody when it comes to encouragement. In fact, I do not believe there is such a thing as too much encouragement. So if you'd like to reach out to me, whether it is, about Preto or anything else with words of encouragement and uplifting, I will receive it. So please reach out. And I would also like to know about your name. What is the story behind your name? Because with this whole talk of, me not really liking my name when I was growing up, I asked a question inside my Facebook group, which, by the way, if you're not in it, you have to join us, the Empowered Woman Community. Just look it up on Facebook and you'll find it. And I asked, did you ever question your parents' name choice for you? And it was so interesting to hear all the different stories of ladies saying, nope, always liked it. And others saying, yep, never liked it, actually changed my name. Or the backstory of, why my mom picked his name, or my dad already had this in his head that this is what the name was going to be if it was a girl. It's so funny to hear the different things. It's funny and it's fun. So I would love to hear the story behind your name, because some stories are actually pretty fascinating. One of my clients, Anari, she is from the UK, and she shared, I forget the specifics, but when I shared this, it prompted her to think about her name story, history, and how this has shaped her and the way she sees herself. And it was just so fascinating. So if all this talk inspires you in any way to think about your name story and how you felt about it, and if it's shaped you in any way, please share it with me. I would love to know it as well. As usual, thanks so much for tuning in today. I have a hunch that this was encouraging and empowering to you, so connect with me, join my Facebook group, send me a message, connect with me on social media. I would love to hear back from you. Until next time, bye.